This Read 180 topic is made possible by a grant from
Kellogg's Rice Krispies. Celebrating the joy of kids growing through interaction.
And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the annual financial support of viewers like you.
You know about Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Susan B. Anthony, and Abraham Lincoln. These are people who took bold steps to change lives. But some people have changed many lives and they've gone unrecognized. One of your VJs is about to change that for you. And I'm sure, as you know, Kirk is a great believer in the importance of every single human being. So he's the one who's going to bring you the news on some forgotten heroes.
That's right. These heroes might be gone, but there's no way we're going to let them be forgotten. It's up to us to learn about them, okay? Now, we're all heroes in some way and we all touch lives, but these folks touched lots of lives. These first heroes were immigrants to our country who didn't receive a whole lot of hospitality. Watch.
Los Moneros.
Anyone who has ever struggled for equality on the job can understand the fight of the Mexican mine workers, Los Moneros. In the early part of the 20th century, many Mexicans migrated in order to work in the copper mines of the Southwest. They worked by candlelight for up to 12 hours a day in a maze of tunnels 4,000 feet underground. The physical conditions were harsh, but the blatant discrimination was even harsher. They worked the most dangerous jobs and the longest hours for about half the pay. They were forced to live in the worst areas, and socializing with Anglo workers was strictly forbidden. Then, during World War II, Mexican Americans earned more medals of honor than any other ethnic group in the country. They returned from war ready to fight for their rights. Los Moneros had previously organized the Mexican Union. Now they called a strike, and 90% of the mining workforce was on picket lines. After nearly 4 months, the mining companies met union demands for equal pay, benefits, and promotions. Los Moneros not only won their victory for equality on the job, but have become heroes to anyone who believes in fighting for what's right. Back in the 1940s during World War II, the love of our country was at an all-time high. And so was the love of baseball, our national pastime. So, what happened when baseball players went off to war? The sport was so important to our national spirit that some pretty surprising folks stepped up to the plate and came to the rescue. Watch.
Playing hardball.
When America entered World War II, millions of men were being drafted, and some people were afraid that the all-American and all-male sport of baseball would be hit hard. They had an idea.
Yes, they make hits wherever they go. Diamond Gals, adding something unique to our national pastime.
From 1943 to 1954, the new All-American Girls Professional Baseball League had their turn at bat. It really began as a gimmick. Training camp included charm school. Uniforms were designed to show plenty of leg. And publicity wasn't about how well they played ball. They played with a softball, and bases were moved closer together. People figured women couldn't cut it. Well, they figured wrong. Soon, they were pitching hardballs, swinging Louisville sluggers, and stealing bases in regulation spikes, even if it meant hitting the dirt in their skirts and racking up a few bruises. They were tough enough to travel overnight in a bus, then play a doubleheader the next day. In fact, they played 120 games in 130 days. No sissies here. The All-American Girls Professional Baseball League began as a stunt, but by their final season, everyone knew that skirts and all, these women were true athletes. And they sure could
When you think about equal rights, you think about being treated equally in wages, in the right to vote, or even in the right to play pro baseball. But how about the right to fight a war? Yeah, at the beginning of the Civil War, blacks were not allowed to fight, and they actually wanted to. Here's the story.
The Men of the 54th.
We all know that the Civil War made slavery illegal in the United States, but how many of us know about the black soldiers who fought and died for their own freedom? This is the Massachusetts 54th, the first regiment of all black soldiers from a free state to fight for the Union. For the first 2 years of the Civil War, blacks had not been allowed to enlist in the Union Army. Speaking out against the ban, Frederick Douglass said, "This is no time to fight only with your white hand and let your black hand remain tied." It took several costly defeats for the Union government to agree. Finally, in 1863, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed some Confederate slaves and authorized black men to serve in the Union Army. But the right to fight did not mean equality. Blacks were still not citizens, not allowed to lead their own men into battle, and paid about half that of white soldiers. But in battle after battle, the soldiers of the 54th proved themselves over and over again. Finally, after 18 months, Congress equalized their pay. And on July 28, 1868, Congress passed the 14th Amendment, making all blacks citizens of the United States. In all, 178,975 black men served as soldiers for the victorious North. That's 178,975 heroes we don't know nearly enough about.
In the 1800s, railroads were the fastest way to transport people and goods, but there wasn't one that stretched from coast to coast, so the country was sort of divided. Many people out west said that building a railroad starting at the west coast was nearly impossible. So who built one? A good guess would be that whoever it was, they're forgotten heroes. Watch.
Uniting the States.
In the early 19th century, the only way to travel west of the Mississippi was by wagon train. We needed a coast-to-coast railroad to bridge the gap between east and west. That would take 1,700 miles of railroad track. So the Central Pacific Company began laying track in the west going east from Sacramento, but most hard laborers were off seeking their fortunes in the California gold rush. So in 1865, the company began to hire immigrants from China. They proved tougher than most other workers who often didn't last a day. Before long, over 10,000 Chinese workers were overcoming the railroad's biggest obstacle and doing what most people said couldn't be done. They blasted through the rocky high Sierras and laid track. With no power drills, it took 3 8-hour shifts just to drill a hole deep enough to hold the explosive. To set the charge, workers were often lowered over the sides of cliffs in baskets they wove themselves. They did it all by hand, inch by inch, around the clock and in every type of weather. And in 3 years, their hard work produced only 40 miles of track. Snowslides buried hundreds of workers whose bodies turned up in spring, with hands still tightly clutching picks and shovels. In all, more than 1,000 Chinese workers died while building the western part of the railroad. They lost their lives while laying the iron road that united America.
Say, speaking of forgotten heroes, you just completed another topic. Great job.